very, very nice for Davidji and me to be back in India and be with all of our dear friends here again. Dayaji and Keshavaji have asked us to speak on one aspect of success, which is raising your energy. And when we think of raising energy, there are really two aspects to it. One is increasing the quantity of energy, and the other is raising the quality of energy. And I want to talk about both of those aspects. So here we're talking about success, and we think in a certain sense that success in life may be due to karma of the past or fate. You know, a person is born into a wealthy family and grows up and has the best education possible and is given a plum job and quickly achieves success, and we can look at that kind of a picture and say, well, didn't take much effort on their part, individual effort on their part, in order for them to be a big success in this life. Well, they wouldn't have been born into that circumstance if they hadn't in the past made some kind of an effort, something in them attracted that situation. Now, it isn't always good karma to be born with what seems to be an easy path. You know what seems to be an easy path? Anybody's path other than one's own. It's only our own path that seems, oh, that's a really difficult one. For others, we usually say, oh, they have it so easy, they don't have to struggle. But everybody has to struggle. When we first came on the spiritual path, we thought, as many people do, oh, now that we're trying to work for God and please God, He's going to clear all the brambles out of the way for us. And I don't know that He actually plants brambles in front of devotees, but He makes sure that we get the lessons that are going to help us grow. Because if we're serious about our spiritual seeking, our spiritual path, then we have to overcome those karmic tendencies that we bring into a life or bring into life after life after life. And they're there, and unless we untie that knot, we are going to continue to, I don't know, be influenced in the wrong direction by those patterns. And in some cases, the karma might result in some sort of disease that we have to deal with. And so one of the problems that people have in general, and one of the fundamental principles on the spiritual path, is that we cannot blame circumstances for what is happening to us. We cannot blame other people for causing us problems. This is one of the basic teachings of Master and of all spiritual teachings. So one might think of it, a person who's dealing with disease, for instance, thinks that that disease is causing me problems. But it's really the other way around. My problems are causing me to have that disease. And that disease is just an objectification of some karmic pattern that I have, that by having it objectified in that way allows me to see it and get my mind around it, get my hands on it, and try to change myself so that I don't vibrate, I don't have the same kind of magnetism that continues to attract that particular kind of problem. And so we clear away that bramble. But if we haven't cleared away all the other potential seeds of brambles, then God will take those seeds and plant them in front of us so that we can see what we have to deal with. And so one way of dealing with life and dealing with the apparent challenge of life is to, first of all, completely accept whatever is coming to us. Even better, if we can, to be grateful for that which is coming to us, no matter whether it seems good or seems bad. That's just our reaction to it. Master said, everything, all conditions are neutral. It's how we react to them that makes them seem either positive or negative. One time in a satsang that Swamiji was giving, someone asked, can you tell us what is good karma? And he gave a wonderful, wonderful answer. He said, good karma is that which helps you move toward God, and bad karma is that which moves you away from God. And so everything is neutral. For instance, winning a big lottery prize. That seems like, well, of course, that's good karma. Well, in many, many cases, it's not good karma at all. Many people lead very unhappy lives after that. But those who, for instance, receive that and use that money in service or to help something or to help others, that's good karma because it expands the consciousness. So everything that comes to us is ultimately neutral. It's only there for us to untie whatever karmic knots and patterns we have. And so coming back and applying that to success in life, the success that we have, whether good, bad, medium, is going to depend on how much energy we put out. If not directly in this life, then if you look at the longer rhythm, because one life may not be enough to see these longer rhythms, but in a longer rhythm of many lifetimes, we will see very clearly that those who put out more energy or have a higher energy are more successful. It reminds me of the statement of one champion golfer, I think it might have been Jack Nicholson. Nicholas, yeah, thank you. Now this is a first, I think. Davey correcting me on some sports fact. Usually it's the other way around. And usually if I have anything to say about an actor or actress or any entertainment, I muddle it all up, so she corrects me there, but it's usually the other way with sports facts. Anyway, thank you. So, Tom Nicholson, Jack Nicklaus, I think it was he who said some reporter was saying after a round, he said, "You seem to be very lucky in that round." And he said, "Yes, you know, it's a strange thing. The more I practice, the luckier I get." And so it is. The more we do something, the more we put out an effort, the more success that brings us. Now, as I said, there are two aspects to raising our energy. The first is quantitative. And for this, we have to understand, and this is a very important principle, that we do not create the energy that we express. That energy is created by God. There's a universal pool of energy around us. Master would sometimes take a little pinch of his flesh like that when he was lecturing in America, and he said, "You have no idea how much energy is available. You, by a little gram of flesh, if you could turn that into electricity, it would power the city of Chicago for a week." And so we swim in a sea of enormous energy. and we just don't perceive it very clearly. So think of a sea surrounding you of energy that's inexhaustible. Just as, there's an atmosphere of air that surrounds us all, and we never think, oh my goodness, I better save up some air because I might run out of air. We just breathe and never give it another thought. Well, the energy around us is supporting us all the time. And we think, oh, I make all these choices, but when is the last time you chose to have your liver function working while you're sitting here? Or how many of you are now consciously digesting the food from the tea that we had? So most of life's processes are going on automatically, and that's the flow of energy or prana or life force that is flowing into us. And in fact, Master teaches us that that prana comes into us through the area of the medulla. And that's why when we do the energization exercises, we concentrate on drawing in energy from that source, or that point from the universal source, because if we can learn to consciously draw that energy into us, then we can, Master said, the body is like a battery, and if we can consciously re-energize the battery, then the battery doesn't run down. If we only had to depend upon food and air and water as the source of our energy, we would quickly run down, but we're really supported by this cosmic energy. So think of it this way. I want to now talk about how we apply that to the law of success. So we have this infinite energy around us, and according to our will, and Master defined will as desire plus energy directed toward a particular purpose. So let's use an example of a student who wants to succeed, in this case in having good marks and having success in passing an exam. Well, the more energy, the more desire that that student has to do that, the more energy plus desire, the more energy that student puts into studying, for instance, or to learning and to memorizing and to opening themselves, the more that energy flows. And it isn't just that flow of energy by studying that we learn facts. It's more powerful than that, because a flow of electricity through a wire creates an energy field around that wire, and that energy field is magnetic. And so as we, for instance, as that student concentrates on his or her lessons and really is trying to learn, he or she will create an energy field around themselves that will actually attract success. So it isn't just a linear, do this and this is the result. You do this and this is the result, plus you create a magnetic energy field around you that attracts universal forces to you that helps you achieve that result, because you're connected to the universe. That universal energy surrounds you, and the more you allow yourself to allow that flow to happen, then the more powerful will be your success. So let me use the image now of, let's say, a fireman who has the goal of, there's a house on fire, and he has a hose and he wants to put out the fire in that house. And so let's think of that hose as being like a channel of energy. The water flowing through that hose is energy that flows through our system, through our central nervous system, through our all of the aspects of our body, mind, emotions, and soul, so that that energy is flowing. Now, the first thing that fireman needs to do, if he's going to be successful in that, is what? He has to turn on the valve, or he has to connect. First of all, he has to connect that hose of his to the fire hydrant, which represents, think of a huge lake of water that is potentially ready to flow through that fire hydrant, but nothing's going to flow into the hose unless the fireman connects that hose to the hydrant. So first we have to connect ourselves to the universal source around us. And that is where Master said that the greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. So we have to focus our mind toward a particular object, toward a particular goal of succeeding in a particular way. So we connect the hose. Then, simply connecting the hose, the fireman can point that hose for 3 days at the fire and have no effect whatsoever. He has to turn the valve on, doesn't he? And so we have to turn the valve on. That's our willingness, our enthusiasm. So if the student, coming back to that example, is studying and saying, oh, I hate mathematics. I'm so bad at mathematics. I just can't, I hate this subject. I don't like my teacher. Oh, it reminds me of a great joke. This mother comes in and says to her son, wake up, you've got to, it's late, you have to get to school. And the son says, I don't want to wake up, I don't want to go to school. And she says, get up, you're late and you have to go to school. He said, there are 2 reasons I don't want to go to school. All the children hate me, and all the teachers hate me. And the mother says, get up, you still have to go to school. There are 2 reasons you have to go to school. 1, you're 51 years old, and you're the principal. I don't know where I was. I have to recollect where the point was. But at any rate, we have to turn on the valve in order to allow that water to flow through the hose.
You're saying if the student hates mathematics.
Oh yeah, if the student hates mathematics, they aren't going to turn on that valve. The second thing is when we have negative attitudes towards something, that's like having that hose. We might turn the valve on full power, but if the hose is full of leaks, not very much is going to end up coming out of the nozzle. And so all of those resistances that we have, I hate this, I don't like that, oh, I'm afraid of my teacher, oh, the other kids will think I'm superior if I get a good grade, you know, all of those crazy little mixture of emotions and tendencies and complexes that people have are like leakages in that hose. And so one of the things, I'm now talking about quantitative flows of energy. 1, we have to connect. 2, we have to turn on that flow. And 3, we have to try not to have all that energy leak out or get clogged. The other thing that happens is that hose can get clogged up. Think of a hose with a lot of soil inside of it. Not very much pressure can flow off the other end. And so if we have a lot of blockages in us, then the energy is not going to flow very well. Those blockages are attitudinal. So if we have attitudes within ourselves, complexes that block the flow of energy, then not very much is going to flow out. So we have to try to at least suspend those blockages. I read a study that they did a study of many different aspects. One of the things that they found was people who are happy are more successful. And it's not just because they please the boss and they're promoted. In many different ways, people working alone, people doing things where they're not necessarily, their happiness is causing interaction with other people. It's just the attitude of happiness or the flow of energy that comes when we have a positive attitude creates again a flow that draws success. And so we have to, again, we have to connect, we have to turn on, we have to get the blockages and leakages out of the hose. And then the final thing that we need to do if we're going to achieve the goal, in this case of putting the fire out, is we have to point the nozzle toward the fire. And so many people, you know, they might have a lot of energy, but that energy is scattered. They're pointing it over here and over there. Oh yes, I'm supposed to study. And oh, I've got to text my friend and see what they're doing. And oh yes, I'm supposed to study. And so they're pointing the hose all over, and every once in a while it passes by the house on fire and puts out a little flame. But we have to concentrate our energy toward the goal. Swamiji was so powerful in this. He would be able to concentrate his energy just laser-like. And the result of that was he could accomplish very quickly something that would take other people an extremely long time. In fact, Daviji and I came here on the day that he started to write the beautiful scripture, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, many of you have read that. It's one of the really, for me, it's my favorite of all of his books. It's so deep and so powerful and so clear and gives the teachings of the Gita in wonderful ways. So that book is over 600 pages long, and it's filled with very, very deep thoughts. That's the kind of a book that would take a scholar maybe 10 years of research and writing and having to check out this and slowly working on his manuscript. And you know, how long would it take to write a book like that for most people? Swamiji started that book the night before Dave and I arrived in India, which was in early October. And then he set himself the goal of writing 10 pages each day. And so he would write 10 pages and 10 pages, and he accomplished that goal because of his laser-like concentration. And so at the end of 2 months, he had written that entire book. And we were staying just outside his office in Gurgaon, where he was living at the time. And we would see the light come on at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, and then he'd work for an hour or two, and then the light would go off, because when his mind was uplifted into that and he was so joyful during that time, he would come down and he was from his office down to the living room, and he would have his 10 pages, and it was like I don't know, a kid wanting to share a box of treasures, and he would read the pages to us, and what do you think? And but so much joy and so much energy during that time, but laser-like concentration. And at the end of 2 months, he had produced a world-changing scripture, and it was due to the fact that he was able, once he set himself a goal, he was able to keep his mind absolutely focused on that. And so we have to connect, we have to turn on, we have to eliminate the blockages and the leakages that don't allow the water to get to the nozzle, and then we have to keep that nozzle pointed toward the house that's on fire. And if we do those four things, we will be able to put out that fire. So that is the flow of energy, raising the energy in a quantitative sense. But now I also want to talk a little bit about the qualitative aspect of energy, because there are many people in this world who are successful. They follow those four principles, but they're successful at what they're trying to do in the world, but they're not successful spiritually, because in many cases what they're trying to accomplish is not dharmic. We see this in business. If a person is doing business in such a way that that person is greedy and dishonest and corrupt and a tyrant over the employees, doesn't care about the employees, it may be that in this life, or at least for some part of this life, that businessman will achieve what looks from the outside to be success. That he will get rich, that he'll have a big house and all of the toys, grown-up toys that he wants, the cars and the boats and all of that. But that is not success, because in the longer rhythm of lifetime and lifetime and lifetime, adharmic action actually suppresses us or pushes us down, because it creates wrong attitudes in us. So qualitatively, we have to work in attunement with that universal source of energy. We have to work in attunement with God. We have to work in attunement with the principles of Dharma. And Ananda has, from Swamiji, said there are two basic principles that Ananda is built on. The first is, where there is Dharma, there is victory. He got that from, I think it was a motto of the Maharaja of Kuch Bihar. I think that's where the source was. But where there is Dharma, there is victory. And so we have to act dharmically. We have to act in alignment with the true laws of the universe. Because if we don't act in attunement with the laws of the universe, maybe not right away, but ultimately we will suffer. And I saw a bumper sticker in America. They have humorous bumper stickers. This said, "Gravity, it's the law." And so if we don't act in attunement with the laws of gravity, we could step off the balcony of a building and fall to our death. And so we have to, but yeah, everybody can recognize the law of gravity because God makes it obvious to us. But what about the law of honesty? It's not quite so obvious to us. It looks like we can break that law and get away with it. What about the law of non-greed? Looks like that's another one we can break and get away with it. What about violence? Well, does anybody in this world think that they can achieve their goals through violence and get away with it? Well, of course. So there are lots of these laws of the universe, of Dharma, that in a single lifetime don't necessarily look like they will prevent us from achieving success. But ultimately, outward success is meaningless. What does it matter, ultimately, whether you're rich or you're poor? What we're really after is happiness. If making you rich could make you happy, then it might be a goal worth pursuing. But it can't. It's incidental to that. And so we're seeking happiness. We seek that. We think that wealth will give it to us. But those who achieve great wealth, they find out in many cases that it's a burden. Fame, the same thing. So all of those things outside of ourselves that we pursue even though we are successful in achieving them, unless they're in tune with the laws of Dharma, there won't be spiritual victory. And so, qualitatively, we have to be sure that our goal is something. A simple test would be this. Just ask yourself, when you're a little bit calm, is, Master, are you approving of this as a goal for me? If we would just ask that simple question, God, in whatever form we would like, God, do you approve of this as a goal for me? If the people who cheat would say, God, do you approve of me cheating my customers? What would the answer be? Well, of course not. But they don't, I mean, they put up veils they'll go to great lengths to keep themselves or anyone else from getting them to ask that question, because obviously they know the answer to it. But just that simple thing. As you go through life, just ask, God, is this something that you would approve of? Master, is this something that you would like? So, let me talk just briefly now about some of the things that God approves of. He approves of love. If you will, because these are qualities of Himself. If you act with love and kindness and compassion, you will act absolutely in attunement with God. If you act with wisdom, you will automatically be in tune with God. If you do something in a peaceful way or that brings peace, that's another quality, another aspect of God. So any of the aspects of God, if your activities are in tune with that and produce more of that into the world and into the world around you, that automatically will bring you in attunement with God. And qualitatively, as well as quantitatively, when we can combine high energy and flow and focus with the aspects of God that are helpful and pleasing and serviceful to the world, then ultimately that is where success lies. And so raising our energy, both qualitatively and quantitatively, will ultimately bring us to the success that we're seeking, and that success, in the final analysis, is spiritual freedom and union with God.
Good evening, everyone. I'll also share just a few words with you, and then we'll have time for questions, and then do other things. Yeah, we'll have a time for you to come up and receive a blessing from Master, and then if any of you would like, we can sign your books as well. First, let me begin by saying what a joy it is for us to be back with all of you here at our beautiful center in Delhi, and to share Master's teachings together. What a great gift Master was to the world, and ever increasingly it's as though his teachings are a great wind that only gains momentum. You know, some people, most of us who in our limited consciousness, we live our lives, and if we're fortunate, our family and friends remember us and think, oh, what a nice person that was. But the story fades. But with the soul of the caliber of Guruji, the power of his consciousness only grows, because every time that wind of blessing touches a receptive soul, it grows stronger, and that wind becomes stronger, and it's just really blowing across this planet. Before we came here, we were in Singapore, and the enthusiasm for Master's teachings and working with devotees in China and devotees in South America. And it's really amazing how the power of that one life is changing the consciousness of our planet. And it's a true thing. We have seen it. And everywhere we go, we meet people who say, oh, autobiography of a yogi, it absolutely changed my life. So Master said that for a teaching to be true, it needs to be applicable to our lives on all three levels: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And so this principle that we are speaking of this evening, how to raise our energy for success, I would like to share with you briefly just some stories from Swamiji's life, Swami Kriyananda, about how he applied this principle on all three levels, because his life was exemplary. You know, if Master is the wind of divine grace that blows through the world, Swamiji was one of the disciples that helped us to be aware of that grace. That's really what he did for me. I think I was always looking for higher meaning in life. But then when I came to Swami Kriyananda as a young devotee, he showed me how these teachings can be lived on every level of your life for success. And the joy and enthusiasm with which he lived his life, whether it was going to Disneyland and enjoying the rides, or enjoying a nice picnic with friends, or writing a great spiritual book, or having hours of meditation, whatever it was, to show that enthusiasm and heightened energy makes life vibrant with higher awareness. So on a physical level, some of you know these stories. Swami told them, he wrote about them, but he tells the story when he was first building Ananda village. And when I say first building, I mean hammer and nails, you know, that level. And he was trying to put up the first dome that was to be our temple dome. And there's something called a staple gun where it's very stiff and you have to squeeze it, and it puts a very firm metal staple between two thin struts of wood. And there was a young woman who was also helping Swamiji do this. In fact, it was Jyotisha's sister that day. And so, and the staple gun was so hard, and they were trying to build this simple building to be sort of a temporary temple, first temple at Ananda. And the Jyotisha's sister, Mary, she just kept trying to do it, and she said, I can't do it, Swami, it's too hard. He said, give it to me. You know, Swami would never take no for an answer. So he took that staple gun and he squeezed it, and he said, oh, it was so hard. I could barely do it. And I did it once more and twice more. And he said, I felt I couldn't do it anymore. And then, Swami would never take no for an answer. Then he focused his energy, just as a wonderful illustration that Jyotish gave of the hose. He plugged his energy into that universal source, and he said, by my will, I will keep doing this. And he said the more he did it, the stronger he became, until finally he just did it for hours and finished the whole project. And so this is a principle, and I want you to be mindful. When you think, oh, I'm too tired, I can't do this, that is the moment to say, I will see if I can apply these teachings. You know, you come home and your family says, oh, can you do this? And, oh, I'm too tired, I can't do that. You know, once recently, I had a very busy day and was so happy to get home, and the day was done. And just then my friend called, and she said, you know, I'm feeling very ill. I need could you go and get me some medicine? And I thought, oh. But then I thought, perfect opportunity. Thank you, Divine Mother. Because I had to put out that extra energy, and I went and got her the medicine she needed and brought it over. And when I was driving home after that, honestly, I'll share this as a personal story, but tears began flowing down my face because I began thinking, thank you, Divine Mother, for giving me the opportunity to break through the sense that I don't have the energy to do it. And so when you reach that moment, and it can be on many different levels, when you just think, I can't do it, that is Divine Mother's opportunity to you to say, try. Put out that little more energy. Think of Swami with that staple gun. And when he pushed through the sense of I don't have energy, he found unlimited energy. And we have found this again and again in so many different experiences of Ananda. So take those moments where you say, I can't, or I won't, or I'm too tired, and say, testing ground. Let me find that reservoir of energy, that hidden source that is always there. But sometimes you have to come to the end of your known limits to push past and find the unknown limits of energy. It's a very important point, and it's something that applies on all levels. So that's physical. Then mental, emotional, raising our energy. A story from Swamiji's life. He was a young monk, had been with Master about a year, and Master was very busy at the time. He didn't have a lot of time to give to the individual disciples who were living in the ashram because he was correspondence and writing books and lecturing. But one day the word came that Master needed some big bottles of water up in his apartment. So we said, I'll carry them up because he wouldn't be able to see Master then. So he carried them up to Master's kitchen, and Master was in the other room dictating some correspondence. And Swami was trying to get his attention, so he was rattling the bottles around and making as much noise. But Master didn't pay any attention. Again, it was the point where God brings you to the point of failure so that you can prove to yourself that you can succeed. And so Swami became very discouraged. Master didn't acknowledge his presence at all. And he went back down to his room, and Swami got depressed. And he thought, Master doesn't love me. I'm just another worker here. I'm not important to him. And he started going into a downward spiral. We all know that. You take one step through that door, self-pity or thinking that you've been treated unfairly, and it's a slippery slope, and down we go. And so Swami began going down that slope, and then he said, no, I'm going to put out more energy. And he held his attention at the spiritual eye, and immediately his thoughts changed. And he thought, of course Master's busy. He lets me live here in his ashram with him. What more do I want? I have his blessings every day. I don't need him to acknowledge my little personality or my little being. And immediately, his whole perspective on life changed. Try that experiment too. When you get to the point where you start going into a negative mood, go and meditate immediately. I remember once, some years ago, someone had said something to me. I guess she was in a bad mood. And it was kind of cutting, kind of hurtful. And I could feel I reacted, and I could feel it was pulling my energy down. And I thought, no, I don't want to do that. So I just went off by myself, started doing pranayama, just regular breathing. And within a few minutes, it was gone. I just felt, that darkness tried to get me, but it won't get me. That's by raising our energy. Just as the illustration Jyotish said, plug into the energy, get rid of the leakages and the blockages, direct it towards your goal, and you break through. And really, all of life, Master said, every test in life is a test of our willpower. It simplifies everything. Every test is a test of our willpower. The greater the will, the greater the flow of energy. The greater the flow of energy, the greater the success. It's really quite simple. really. It's the beauty of Master's path is the simplicity and the profundity, the depth. And then finally, spiritually. Again, the story, this is, Swami tells it in the New Path, that he could, a young monk, he could feel there was some intellectual pride. He was very brilliant mind and very accomplished in many ways, but God doesn't care about such things. You're going to impress God that you have a diploma, He doesn't care. God looks for the openness of the heart. And so Swami realized, and Master kept telling him, you're too intellectual, you need to get devotion, get devotion. But Swamiji didn't know how. He felt that intellectual pride, and finally one night he got so frustrated by that limitation of his consciousness that he said, I summoned up all my energy. And when he tells the story, he would yell it. He just thought of that sense of intellectual pride, and he just screamed. And it used to hurt my ears when Swami would yell, but he said, get out! And he, with so much energy, he said, I felt the ego left, and it never came back. And that evening, I went out into the garden at Mount Washington, Master's Monastery in Los Angeles, and Master was standing there. And Swamiji said, I went up and I knelt and touched his feet, and Master blessed me, and he said, very good. There was no words exchanged. Swami didn't explain, but Master could see. He summed up that energy to break through. And so spiritually, again, many people say, oh, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere in meditation and so forth. And we all have those feelings, to be honest. We feel, I don't know that I ever met any person on the spiritual path who didn't feel they could be doing more. But nevertheless, always try to push your boundaries. Physically, mental, emotionally, and most important, spiritually. Push them by greater energy, by directing your willpower, and never take defeat as an answer. Never say, I have failed. You just say, I haven't tried long enough, I haven't tried hard enough. Don't get discouraged, but keep trying, keep trying. And as Lahiri Mahashaya said, doing, one day done. And so this is the great blessing and power and truth of our teachings. They work, they transform our lives on every level. And in the simplicity of awareness, that if I try, the power of the universe will come from behind me and sustain me. I just close with one story from our own life. We were trying, at Ananda Village, in the early years particularly, we did everything. We worked in the garden, we built the buildings, we painted the houses, whatever needed to be done. It was just us, and we were building it for God. But for one time, Jyotish and I had taken on this project. We were going to be teaching a month-long course at our meditation retreat, and we were moving into another house. And we had 1 week to fix up the interior. It was pretty shabby. And it was just us to do it. So we said, okay, this day we will put the plaster up on the walls. Then that's Monday. Tuesday we will paint. Thursday we will put the carpet. We had a plan each day, and it was an impossible plan. I mean, we never could have accomplished it. But we said, we have 1 week, so let's try this. And so Monday we said we would plaster all the walls, do a nice textured plaster. So we started at 9 o'clock in the morning, and by, I don't know, noon, let's say if it was this room, we would have a little bit of a corner done. And we think, how are we going to finish it in 1 day? But we said, well, we will try. And somehow we would go into a time warp, and from noon till 3, we would do 3/4 of the room. And every day just like that. then we would be painting, and then by the afternoon we'd have, you know, an eighth of it done. By the end of the day we'd be all done. And I really believe God was showing us, if you do your part, I'll come in and do the rest. Just do your part. And so it is spiritually too. We may look at our lives, at our meditation, at our sadhana, and say, I've been working at this for 3 years, and all I've got is one little part of the room done. Don't worry about it. You just keep trying. By the end of the life, you'll realize, it's all done. Who did it? God did it. So really it's about feeling that power of divine energy and saying, with your grace, nothing is impossible. And this is what Master, through his grace, through his teachings, through his presence in our life, demonstrates. So we have a few minutes for questions, and then we want to have a blessing and do a book signing and many things. So, any questions?
Okay, well that was quick.
I'm going to tell you a story. When Jyotish said, I was trying to think of the name of the golfer, Jack Nicklaus. Jyotish enjoys reading about sports, and he was an athlete as a young man, so he likes American football. He played it as a young man, and I know nothing about it. It's just, you know, it's like computer programming for me. I know other people can do it, but I can't do it. So, but I like to tease him sometimes. So for some reason, I just happened to see a headline that said, quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, Danny Marino is, you know, and so Jyotish was teasing me, and he said, what do you think about the quarterback for the Miami Dolphins? And I said, yeah, Danny Marino's pretty good. I shocked him. It's not just shocked him. I was able to shock him. So, okay, questions? If there are, okay, brave soul.
I'm trying.
You can stand up, it's easier to.
My name is Ritu, and I'm trying and meditating for some years now. But I'm not sure whether I'm making any progress, as you were saying in your address, and I was thinking as if you are talking to me. So, you think there are any signs that one can recognize that one is making some progress?
Yes.
And what are those signs?
Okay. Well, I think the most important sign of spiritual progress is an increased level of joy in your own life. It's hard to know, you know, am I just dreaming? Is my mind focused? Is it subconscious? But we do our best. But little by little, it's like dropping water on a stone every day if we meditate. In fact, we read the most beautiful sentence recently of Master. I hadn't ever seen it before. He said, every single time you meditate, you lessen your karmic burden. Every time. So morning, evening, each day, every day that you meditate, you are lessening your karma. And so one of the ways you can test your progress is an increased level of joy in your life, an increased level of calmness in your life. Things that we were talking with a friend recently here in Delhi who has been on the path for a number of years and was struggling with meditation. And she said, and we hadn't seen her for about 6 months since we were last here. And we looked at her and we said, oh, you seem so much calmer, so much stronger. He said, yes, I feel it. I'm starting to feel that change in myself through meditation. So calmness, less of a reactive nature, things that used to, you know, just immediately you would react. Oh, why did that happen? Why did they say that? You just say, that's all right. I don't need to react. So Master said, your religion is tested in the cold light of day. So it's hard to measure change in consciousness internally, but a good way to measure it is by how your life is going. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going smoothly, but if in the face of adversity you can still be joyful. I remember when, many of you know the story, when we had the forest fire at Ananda village, and everyone was so calm. We lost everything. The whole community burnt down. People were just, what do we do now? And I looked at my Guru Bhais and I thought, I don't think there could be a greater testimony to the power of meditation, to watching the calmness, centeredness, and courage in those people, all of us, in that moment. So,
I would just add that another sign is a decrease in self-focus and self-absorbing. For instance, at the fire, if ever there's a time to be focused about your own needs and your own fears and anxiety, where you've lost everything. One of our members was talking with her mother, and her mother said, well, did you save this and save that? She said, no, Mother, it was all gone. Well, didn't you get this out of the house and that out of the house? No, Mother. And her mother asked one more question. She said, Mother, visualize a handful of ashes. That's what we have left. Well, that woman, we called her Our Lady. Many people donated used clothing and foods and things like that. And so we had a big area where she would go through all of those donations. This woman who had absolutely nothing left except ashes. She spent the next 2 weeks going through everything and thinking, well, this family would need that. Let me set that aside for them. And she had her own family. She had her own family. She had 2 children and a husband, but her aura was just more and more joyful and more expansive. And it was a beautiful thing to see. So another sign is that you begin to think more and more of the needs of others and less of the needs of yourself. We have a wonderful Acharya here, Jayaji, who many of you know. And one time in a satsang, someone raised their hand and said, you've been meditating all these years, have you developed any powers? And Jaya, who's a very humble soul, he said, no, I can't say that I've developed any powers, meaning our power is a sign of spiritual progress. And then he said, well, you know, I would have to say that I have developed one power. I've developed the power to be happy, have choice. He said, I don't always use that power, but I've developed that power. So that's another power or another sign of spiritual progress, that you can catch yourself in daily activities in the midst of, as Master said, the trials of worry, shriek, and
when boisterous
storms howl at me, and worries.
Boisterous storms of trials howl and worries.
Worries shriek at me. Yes. I drown their noises, loudly chanting God, God, God. And so we catch ourselves in the midst of the storms of trials, and we are able to recollect our spiritual path and our spiritual life. All of these are signs that things are progressing for us.
So, don't you think that when we interact on spiritual matters, most of the discussions and interactions are academic and mostly technical or scientific way explained? If you call a word dharma, now you have said it. If I have been practicing dharma, or if I have been understanding dharma, I would understand what great thing you are talking. What is the depth of your talk? But if I do not know, what is dharma, and no guru or no parent or no teacher has ever explained it to me, then it goes down as a technical word. And I may keep on repeating that word 200 times, it does not bring any result. So don't you think that whenever we talk of spiritual things, like you talked out of personal reactions, personal experiences, because God is something of personal experience. It is not something technical or intellectual like what you said. I was smiling when you rightly said, because in my life,
What's your question?
it's an interaction. And it will come, and I hope you will like it, because what I want is that whenever people like him make an interaction with the people or talk to people, then if we go down to the level of explaining how practically we have to go through that test, or that crucial word like you said dharma, karma, theory of karma, theory of rebirth, unless until we understand these things. If you are annoyed, I will not. Sorry.
No, go on.
Understanding is very helpful and very valuable on this spiritual path, but it's not the end all. People would come in, for instance, into the presence of Ananda Ma, and she would be sitting silently under a tree, not saying a word, not giving any teachings, but just the vibration and the heart quality. And people would come, and after 2 hours, when she got up to leave, they would be weeping because she was going away. One time, a scholar came to Master, and he had a whole list of questions. And he read his first question, and Master said, "Love God." And then he thought, well, didn't quite understand the depth, the profundity of my question. So he read his second question. Master said, "Love God." And he thought, well, still didn't quite understand how important these questions are. Third question, "Love God." And Master got up and walked out of the room. Years later, that same man used that incident to describe how Master didn't really understand intellectually. And so understanding and explanation is very helpful, but only one level of how truth is exchanged. Truth is exchanged in many different ways, many different levels.
And one thing you said at the beginning is very important. When you said, if you've never heard Dharma, the word, would you know what it was? Swami wrote in the book, The Essence of the Bhagavad Gita, he was talking of Sanatana Dharma. And he said, even if every living creature on this planet was eliminated, the principle of Sanatana Dharma would still exist on the farthest planet, the farthest touches of all of creation, because because it's a truth that transcends human understanding, human existence even. It just is. And so even if you have never heard of any moral teachings, there is the divine spark within each one of us that knows, even if you never heard of Patanjali or the Ten Commandments or any moral precepts, that truth of Dharma and right action and divine principles, it preclude our understanding or even our knowledge of them. So they would be discovered again and again and again, because it's the very fabric of the universe. So
I have one small question. What you said, over the years, people around me also say that I have changed, I'm calmer, I'm more joyful. But I still have so many moments when I'm very unhappy with my reactions. They're very short, they're very judgmental, they're just like that. How does one work towards that? Because on the bigger scale, yes, there is progress. But how does one in that moment, what a...
I think
when will that change be manifest? Because,
it is being manifested, but in many cases, really what we are is like a piece of fruit that is ripening. And a green apple can't demand to be sweet yet, in all cases. But as long as that apple is in this case, the sun of our spiritual openness, so that God can shine His light on us and give Him some time. But all that we really need to do is do our, I was going to say to do our best, to do our part, not even to do our best, to attempt. As long as our intention is that I want to overcome this tendency to be reactive. As long as that is the intention, that ripening process will continue to go on. And sometimes we are just too hard on ourselves or too impatient with our spiritual progress. I read a beautiful quote from Ananda Sangha that said, "You think that you are doing sadhana, but that is incorrect. You don't do anything. God is doing sadhana through you. It is He who is doing everything. And you do not have to do anything to please God, nor will you receive any reward for what you do. God is not a merchant." And so God is just a universal power of love. And the very fact that your heart yearns for Him means a great, great deal. So we just have to be patient with ourselves. As Swamiji would sometimes say, "Be patient with me, I'm a work in progress."
And just also to say to Preeti, and really this is for all of you who are here, if there's any advice we can offer to you is keep trying spiritually, no matter how hard it seems, no matter how little you feel you've done. If you never stop trying, that day will come when you look back and you say, "I've come a long way." And Swami said once, and it's, I think, well worth sharing, when you find a flaw in yourself, don't despair, rejoice, because that flaw has always been there, you just didn't see it before. And so even the seeing of it, that you're reacting, that's progress, you see? So it's the teachings are so encouraging. It's we who judge ourselves. It's we who say we're inadequate. But all God says is, "I'm so proud of you. You're trying. You're trying to change. You're trying to meditate." And so just infinite encouragement is the way that God draws us closer to Him.
Okay, one last question.
Sir, Master has mentioned that today's progress must be better than yesterday if you want to monitor the progress in meditation. What happened? When I do meditation, sometimes when the progress is good, I feel very happy all the day. And when the progress is not good, I feel very sad. So what should I do?
Keep trying. Simple as that. One time, Master was with Swamiji and some of the other monks, and they were at this beautiful place, Lake Shrine. And the monks were working, Swami was working, and the little flies, the gnats, were buzzing all around them. And Swami looked at Master and he said, "Why, Master, in this beautiful place, do we have to be bothered with these little gnats?" And Master said, "That's God's way of pushing us toward Him." So when we're doing sadhana and we feel, "Oh, I didn't do very well," that's a little gnat. And it's pushing us and it's awakening in our heart the deeper desire to do better. And that deeper desire, we always see desire is an odd creature, because whatever we desire, we're going to achieve ultimately. If we have a desire for wealth, ultimately, because we are an extension of God, we're going to achieve that wealth. And so the desire for God, the desire for deeper sadhana, we're going to achieve that. And as Ananda Ma said so beautifully, someone said, "Isn't the desire for God just another desire?" She said, "Yes, it's another desire. But unlike any other, it's the desire that puts the end to all other desires." And so that desire for deeper sadhana, that even the sense of, oh, I didn't do so well today, is a way of the heart's yearning, which will produce the final result of union with God.
Just the one last.
I wanted to add one thing, and then we'll let you ask your last question. You know, I love that statement of Master's that he said, try to make each meditation deeper than the day before. It's a wonderful goal. But we can't always tell. That's what we were saying to the first question. Because sometimes we'll be going through a period where our meditations are wonderful. We're so able to concentrate and to feel God's presence. And then one day we wake up and we can't go there anymore. We can't find the door to go deeper in meditation. But it's all a process of karmic purification. So when you're going through a deep period, maybe you're not burning up any karma. And then you come to a period where you just simply can't. But maybe that's the time when the karma is coming up and preventing you for that period. So even when you can't say, this is good because I'm burning up karma, and the day will come once more when I can go deep again. So there are cycles in meditation. When you do it, I know you've been on this path for many years, but there are ebbs and flows. But if you make the determination, Lord, good or bad, deep or shallow, this lifetime is for you. And it's only through your grace that anything can be achieved. So Swami would often talk about long rhythms. The spiritual path has long rhythms, like the waves on the ocean. There's the little shallow waves that break on the shore, but then there's the great subsurface waves that move very deeply. And that's what we do on the spiritual path. Okay.
And I'll just share a very, very comforting statement of Master's. He said, if you do 1/100th of what I've asked you to do, you'll get there.
So my question is, when sometimes around you feel everything is so mechanical, you almost like feel things are not normal. You are surrounded with everyone, yet you feel alone. You're almost, because you feel there's a different path you're on, and everything around you seems like, why is everything happening so mechanically, so pseudo? How do you handle that?
Try to go deeper within yourself. When very often it happens when we come back from India to go to America, it's like, who turned off the lights? It just seems so mechanical and so well organized. But the trade-off is there's no light. I'm not being black and white. It's not one or the other. But I think the more we feel God's presence within us, the more you can look at any situation that you find yourself in and you feel a joy, you feel a depth. Again, this was with Swamiji. We could be in the most mundane circumstance, in a shopping mall or, whatever it might be, going to the doctor or whatever it might be, and it was like a window of consciousness opened up, and it seemed like the most beautiful dawn, whatever it was. And so, remember, Master said all circumstances are neutral. It's only how we react to them. And there was one of Master's very close disciples, a woman named Kamala de Silva. She wrote the book, The Flawless Mirror. I don't know if it's available in India, but she and her mother came to Master in the late 1920s, and she was with him for many decades. At the end of her life, she became senile, and she couldn't care for herself anymore. So Swamiji very kindly took her to Ananda, and the devotees there took care of her. But then she got to a point where she needed special medical care, so we put her into a rest home. And we went to visit her there. And she was sharing a room with a woman, also in the rest home, an older woman who had been in a terrible fire. And her face was horribly disfigured, scarred and distorted and so forth. And we walked in the room and we thought, oh, what a shame that Kamala has to see this very terrible face every day. And we walked in, it wasn't us personally, but another devotee. And Kamala said, oh, thank you for coming. Have you met my roommate? Isn't she beautiful? And that's how she saw her. And so the world is just a reflection of our own consciousness. If there's beauty, if there's fluidity, if there's a sense of grace, we can walk through a dark tunnel and it's beautiful. So it's up to us to make the world a beautiful garden.
Master said for the soul, eventually the world takes on a sense of anguishing monotony. And so that sense of mechanical, not fulfilling, is God's way of calling us to Him. Now, since we had said there would only be one more question, now we've already exceeded that by two. You had your hand up. It's only fair to allow you to have your question. But this is the last.
We have to tell you a story. Once we were having dinner with some friends, and they had a little boy, a son about, 7 years old, and there was a big plate of biscuits, and the little boy kept eating them, and finally his mother said, that's the last one. And he took one more and he said, no, Mommy, this is the last one. So you're the last one.
Thank you, that's very kind of you to spare that time. Meditation, how does it help medically for people who are on the path for say 6 years, 16 years, 26 years, still suffer through a medical ailment physically or mentally? How does it help them to get over medical ailments? Whether it's things like schizophrenia, bipolar, cancer, etc.
First of all, understand that those medical problems come in order for us to help work out karma. But more specifically, rather than answer that individually, I'll answer it for a whole population. So let's take, I just read yesterday a study that they now have about 18 million people in America who are meditating daily. And they were just doing a study, and the brains of people who meditate are larger than the brains of those who don't, and they decrease less and less. Everyone's brain size decreases as they age, but for those who meditate, it is a warrant against that, so it decreases less and less. So you take a whole population, and meditation obviously helps. We have a medical clinic associated with Ananda Village, and there are about 5,000 people from the area who go to that medical clinic, plus all of the 250 people from Ananda. And so the doctor's there, but the doctor who's a member and has been there for founding the community clinic 30 years ago. So he's been able to see what the result of meditation and the Ananda lifestyle as compared to others who live in the same area. People from Ananda are 10 years younger than their chronological age, roughly. They need much less medication if they are taking medication. They get over illnesses much more quickly. And so individually can you say, well, meditation is no good because this person still has schizophrenia and this person still gets depression. That's individual karma, but group karma, you can see very, very clearly that meditation makes you happier, makes you healthier, and for tonight's talk, makes you more successful. Okay, thank you.
So I think what we'll do now is maybe Daya will do some chanting, and then we'll have 2 lines, and you can go to Jyotishji or this line, and we'll give you a blessing. And then if you'd like us to sign a book, maybe we'll go back down to the living room, because people may want to leave, and we can sign the books there.